kept aside within its sanctity will be a loser to start with.
Professor Calvert, can Clinton run an effective campaign against George Bush without looking like a hypocrite? I mean, we mentioned a couple points here with the womanizing. Dr. Nasr, you mentioned about the draft and how that hits both parties. The idea being that George Bush has been in office for 4 years, and do you think the Republicans have an edge on the character issue?
No, I don't. I don't know. I don't understand your use of the word hypocrite. He would be running against George Bush, not claiming that he's some kind of paragon of personal virtue, whereas George Bush is not. That would not be his campaign. He would run against George Bush because George Bush doesn't have a vision for the country, that he's been inept as a president, that he's let opportunities slip, that Bill Clinton, has better ideas for governing the country than Bush does. I don't see where hypocrisy comes into it at all.
Dr. Nasr, do you see possibly, I was referring to that and being, with the dirty campaigning that might come up, do you perceive a dirty campaign coming up because of these issues? Do you see the Republican Party playing on the Gennifer Flowers?
Oh, no, that wasn't the question you asked me, though, was it?
It wasn't, but I was referring as a build-up to that, because Clinton is going to try to make issues that he feels are important, and the Republicans on the other side see this close-up shot to maybe hit him on issues that are either A, dead issues or irrelevant issues.
Let me try to make the point I was making earlier in this way. If Bill Clinton attacks George Bush, as, by the way, a lot of other people have been attacking George Bush already, Democrats as well as some Republicans, on the grounds that George Bush doesn't stand for anything, on the grounds that George Bush is a kind of, if you will, a kind of political, not a personal, but kind of a political wimp, okay? Then that would be, it would sound like a personal attack, but it would be attacking Bush's character as a public or a political figure, okay? That's not the same thing as saying that George Bush beats his dog or that George Bush is unfaithful to his wife. That's a different realm of question altogether. Is this going to be a dirty campaign? If Bill Clinton is nominated, I can guarantee it will be a dirty campaign. No question about it. But the question is, what kind of personal attacks are you making? What kind of character issues are you bringing up?
Professor Nasr, because Paul Tsongas, as I mentioned earlier, mentioned that Clinton is a pander bear. And that's the other idea. Is Clinton a pander bear? A panderer for votes? Is he sincere? He's been very successful with the blue-collar women and minorities. He seems to be, like you said, he has an effective campaign, well-organized, more so than Tsongas. Jesse Jackson recently made the comment that Tsongas was probably surprised to get through New Hampshire and didn't campaign and make his campaign strategy any farther than that. What do you think, Professor Nasr?
I think that any candidate running for office, any democracy in particular, has to be Santa Claus, to quote Mr. Tsongas himself. I think the mark of leadership is in identifying what the people need and then courageously prescribing what you think ought to be the solution, even if it is not popular. But in the process of being elected, it is inevitable in the political game not to promise people things they would like to hear. I don't see any campaign that has been successfully conducted without some of this politicking. But there ought to be also, at the same time, leadership exercise. So in the sense that not being led by the electorate, but leading them.
Could I respond to this a little bit?
Please.
Excuse me. I don't know, frankly, the particular charges that Tsongas has made against Clinton on this score. I do know this, that it has been a theme of Clinton's all along, which to me, frankly, I find very attractive, that is encapsulated in the phrase, nobody is going to get something for nothing. Okay? Now, if I understand that correctly, what it means is, what it could mean at any rate is this. Yes, certain groups out there are going to get certain kinds of benefits. But in exchange for those benefits, certain things are going to be required of them as well. In particular, this explains the otherwise inexplicable why Bill Clinton is strong both among blue-collar workers and among blacks. Now, that's something that is almost unheard of in recent American politics. What he has said is that, particularly with respect to African Americans, yes, he said to them, we, meaning the government, meaning the society as a whole, yes, we want to help you, but we also want you to help yourselves. Now, that's a kind of message that a lot of Americans are responding to very well. I, for one, would find it very hard to see anything pandering in that. If you underscore the principle of responsibility, the principle of requiring some contribution in exchange for benefits, I don't see how that, as a political stance, can be faulted.
Issue 3, Paul Tsongas. He says he's no Santa Claus. Professor Nasr, what is he?
I think he's in his own way, a Santa Claus in the sense that he is promising the people solutions to the problems that he identified. His strongest message to me as an observer of the campaign as it unfolds is the moral and political courage that he is displaying in telling the American people that there are problems, and solving these problems is going to entail sacrifices, which probably some of us, or maybe most of us, won't like. But unless we address them courageously and do what we are called upon to do in terms of sacrifices, we will not be able to pull out of our problems. Now, his political platform is full of promises he is expected to be a Santa Claus for business, for instance, if he's elected. Or Clinton is presenting himself as the Santa Claus for the lower echelons in society, socioeconomically speaking, and what have you. And both, I think, are getting their message through and getting the kind of support from the sectors in society that they are essentially addressing.
Professor Calvert.
Well, I confess to taking my cues here about Tsongas, not only from what I've seen of his campaign, but also I happen to respond warmly to the opinion of Sidney Blumenthal, who writes in the New Republic on the current campaign. And Blumenthal points out something that makes a lot of sense to me. What is he, you say, if not a Santa Claus? Blumenthal calls him really the last Puritan. He sees in Tsongas something that others have noted, and that is a tendency to self-righteousness, which a lot of people find off-putting. A belief that his view of things is so virtuous and so righteously held that to disagree with him is somehow to be immoral. This is something that bothers me about Tsongas. What else is Tsongas? Tsongas is also, if you look at the substance of his policies, he's also fits the description that someone gave out when he said, well, yes, liberal republicanism is still alive, but you find it in the Democratic Party. And he had Paul Tsongas in mind. His policy has also been described as a kind of Reaganism without tears, an extension modified and made palatable to the upper middle classes of both parties, of pretty much the same kind of economic vision that Ronald Reagan had and that George Bush has ostensibly not been following. So the question of his Democratic Party bona fides, I think, is legitimately raised. This, of course, is what Harkin tried to do when he was still in the campaign, to suggest that Paul Tsongas was really not one of them, that he would or should feel perhaps more comfortable in the Republican Party than in the Democratic.
I hear you. Now, Professor Nasr, Paul Tsongas took a beating in Super Tuesday. He did not score well with the blacks. He did not do well with the working class. What does Paul Tsongas have to do to get the momentum back in his campaign?
I think he has established a certain momentum from which he cannot detract and maintain the image that got him so far. I think if he tries to do what Clinton is doing to appeal to these people, he will be, I think, taken to have followed Clinton's lead, and therefore I think his best bet is to continue the message he has been relaying to his public, perhaps become a little bit more specific, abandon these labels, Santa Claus, and these comparisons with labels which are simple to say but difficult to give concrete relevance for. So I think he has to maintain the image he has already carved for himself in this campaign. I think that it will carry him, probably give him enough momentum to be on the ticket ultimately, but I don't think that it will carry him to win the...
So you see him as a possible vice presidential candidate on the Democratic side?
Yes, I do, and I think Clinton himself saw him as such recently.
Professor Calvert?
Well, my first instinct is to say that his hope lies in persuading Bill Clinton to drop out of the race. That's, of course, not likely to happen. I think, in fact, though, seriously, Tsongas' only hope would be if Clinton somehow and inexplicably self-destructs, or if the heavy artillery that the Republicans are chortling about having against Clinton is somehow brought out in advance. But I don't see, frankly, that either of these things is going to happen.
Issue 4, Jerry Brown. Jerry Brown, the past week, won the Colorado primary. What do Colorado people know that we don't? Professor Calvert.
Jerry Brown is scoring heavily in those parts of the country and in those parts of the electorate that are profoundly disaffected from politics as usual and from Washington. Now, to be sure, that describes an awful lot of people. And much of the vote, much of the support going to Clinton and even to Tsongas is of that description. Jerry Brown is tapping into the most disaffected, the most alienated, the angriest part of the electorate. That's his natural constituency, and you find those people likely to be more in the West than you do, what do I mean? Certainly Colorado has a kind of progressive tradition, of kind of radical progressive tradition, and so it doesn't surprise me at all that he won handily there. No, I have other things to say about Brown, but that's my answer to your question.
Professor Nasr, do you think his California image is a positive or perhaps a liability? Bill Clinton in the last debate told Brown to chill out, and it has the effect of that easygoing California coast attitude for being